Audiobook Rapid Self-Development, written and voiced by Reinhard. This is a long-awaited book for me, and I hope it is for you as well. It has been in the making for quite some time. I realized that this course is essential, and I have spent a considerable amount of time developing it. It all started when I received an email asking, "Where do you know so much from? You can accurately answer any question, Lynn." This made me pause and reflect, as this question, when rephrased, was really asking, "Where do you get your information? And where did you learn all of this?" When I reflected on this, I realized that I absorbed very little information. A long time ago, I learned a lot and attended numerous training sessions, but that was ages ago. In recent years, my approach to self-development and learning has been centered around absorbing minimal information. When I thought about this, I realized that I had an entire unconscious system guiding my actions. I brought this system to light, described it, and today I want to share it with you. So let's start by hearing from you. What brings you here? What problems are you facing? What do you want to solve or learn? What are your goals for this book? Well, I may be a bit unusual, waking up at 6 a.m., but why are you all here so early? Please share your intentions and what you hope to gain from this experience. We have quite a few people here today, and it's great to see so many familiar names. The idea behind this audiobook is to provide you with practical tools for self-development. However, I also have a meta idea regarding this audiobook. I've observed that over the past few years, thanks to the efforts of many of our colleagues, including my friends, the market for audiobooks, seminars, and self-development has expanded significantly. A huge influx of people has entered this space, looking to make quick money. Many of them have never been involved in this field before and lack the necessary skills. But they've realized there's an opportunity to lead audiobooks and cash in. As a result, there is a lot of low-quality content flooding the market. Today, I will guide you step by step on how to reach a state where you hardly ever need to read books. You may not get there immediately, but you will if you truly want to. I will provide a systematic approach to help you get there and explain what this state is characterized by. This is just an introduction to help you get oriented. Chapter 1: Stages of Self-Development. The first two tools for transitioning to the second stage. The first thing I want you to understand clearly is the functions that self-development can serve and the stages a person typically goes through. Not just in the context of reading a single book, but when someone becomes immersed in the self-development industry. Self-development becomes a significant value in their life, meaning they don't just attend a single training, but recognize that ongoing growth is essential. I believe that everyone here today falls into this category. When someone enters this realm, someone who is genuinely interested in self-development, they typically experience distinct stages. From my observations over the years, both in myself and in countless friends and clients from various trainings, I have identified these clear stages. Let me share these stages with you now. They will also represent the functions that self-development can serve for you. For our purposes, we'll define self-development broadly as your activities and interests in various trainings and seminars. Essentially, your work on yourself. We won't get into the specifics of terminology at this point. Just understand self-development in a general sense. Here are the stages and functions. First stage: collecting and belonging. This is one of the most basic functions of self-development. At this level, individuals engage in self-development because it's interesting and creates the feeling of, "I'm not standing still. I'm doing something. I'm growing." Many people remain at this level. What characterizes this level? Typically, people read numerous books but achieve little to no tangible results. While reading many books at this stage is not inherently bad, the lack of results is concerning. The key motivation here is the collection of methodologies and a sense of belonging to a process of development. Essentially, the feeling that they are not stagnating. Women are generally more susceptible to this than men due to differences in psychology. At this level, self development resembles collecting shoes in a closet. You read various books: NLP, Ericksonian hypnosis, contact improvisation, vaginal sun gazing, energy practices, women's seminars, business books, and now all of this knowledge is just sitting in your closet. Alternatively, you might have a virtual closet with a folder on your hard drive labeled books or self development, which accumulates gigabytes and terabytes of materials. Collecting terabytes of information is more of a male tendency. Hoarding books and storing them on a hard drive as backups, ensuring nothing is lost. But I wonder, when will you actually read these books? Perhaps in retirement? Yet the habit persists. This is collecting. Until a certain point, I also had a folder like that, even though I was achieving satisfactory results. I wasn't just collecting for the sake of it. However, I did experience that effect of accumulating knowledge for future use. Eventually, I outgrew that habit, and now my folder contains only what I genuinely might need. Everything else either gets deleted or I don't download it in the first place. I've moved beyond the tradition of hoarding materials. So, what do you need at this stage to transition to the next one? If you have many books but few results, what's next? I've observed and analyzed what happened in my early stages of attending these sessions, both for myself and for others. I've identified four key strategies that can help you shift from mere collecting to achieving initial results. What are these strategies? Both words are key here: discomforting actions. You need to take action, not just attend workshops or read books, but also engage in activities in your everyday life that challenge you and feel uncomfortable. For instance, I attended a communication skills workshop, which was a fundamental psychological training. I learned various techniques and immediately went out to apply them in real life. I wasn't interested in just the theory, I wanted to get out there and try it out. As a result, about 6 months to a year after that training, something remarkable happened. I stopped going to university, yet my grades improved significantly. Before the training, I was averaging CS, but afterward I started earning straight As, even though I wasn't attending classes. As a result, I developed personal effectiveness and built strong relationships with my classmates. I would only attend university for key events, such as exams, which my friends would inform me about. It was like outsourcing my education. Now, let's talk more about discomforting actions. When you learn new techniques or information, it's crucial not only to apply them, but to do so in real life situations that push you out of your comfort zone. Interestingly, even discomforting actions that aren't directly related to a training can significantly boost your results. I remember a time when my friends and I practiced a technique called non standard actions. We would go to public places and do something completely out of the ordinary. For example, we would recite poetry, sing songs, or even walk through a subway station with an open umbrella, whatever felt unconventional. You might even see someone in a subway car having a fit, but they managed to escape before being taken away. Feel free to invent whatever you want. Engage in any wild antics that aren't prohibited by your country's administrative or criminal codes. Your goal is to step outside your comfort zone and perform discomforting actions. This practice helps develop the skill of taking discomforting actions. Once you've honed this skill, you can transfer it to any workshop or self development experience you pursue. Why do many trainings often fail to deliver results? It's because discomforting actions are necessary, yet you may not have developed that skill. You're accustomed to taking actions that are comfortable, actions you repeat day after day. But that's not how real change occurs. This is the first strategy. The second strategy one discovered during my journey was embracing a relentless attitude toward implementation. I threw myself into applying everything I learned without any formal self development or implementation plans. When you finish a workshop, you might think, all right, I'll plan out how to master these techniques over the next 50 years. But trust me, that approach doesn't work. It's tedious, and you're unlikely to follow through. Instead, just dive in and try everything. The only goal here is to cultivate the habit of implementation. That's it. Results will come naturally in the background, but your primary focus should be on forming this habit. The outcomes will follow later. Let's break it down. The first two strategies focus on creating habits. By engaging in discomforting actions, you develop the habit of stepping outside your comfort zone. The second strategy, embracing a relentless attitude toward implementation, builds a habit of integrating new information in the background. This means that as you continue to listen to others or learn from friends, the drive to implement becomes instinctive. I remember a moment when this became almost automatic for me. After participating in several intensive workshops, I had developed a strong habit of taking initiative. Then, I found myself in a much calmer setting, with an audience that wasn't used to such dynamics. At one point, we were in a circle of about 80 people, and the facilitator said, "Leaders, please step forward." I realized only after my body had already taken a step that I had moved. While I was stepping forward, I was still processing the words he had just spoken. In that moment, I understood that anyone who considers themselves a leader should step forward. There were no designated leaders. This was a pivotal experience for me. It illustrated that I had integrated discomforting actions, a relentless drive for implementation, and an internal habit of leadership at a physical level. Your goal is to embody this relentless approach at a physical level. When you're at a live workshop, you should be the one who jumps in first, fully engaged in every opportunity. In an online setting, you should actively ask questions and suggest additional topics that would enhance the discussion. The idea is to develop this habit in your body. Only after you've integrated this practice will you begin to consciously choose when to engage and when to hold back. Eventually, you might find yourself attending workshops more calmly, perhaps sitting quietly in a corner. But remember, if a newcomer is in that corner out of fear and feels unable to participate, that's a different scenario. You have already transitioned through that phase. You've learned to engage without hesitation, and now you can embrace a more relaxed presence. Does this progression over time make sense to you? You're moving through a process that takes you from one extreme to another, gradually finding a balance. Third tool, surround yourself with action oriented people. The third tool is to cultivate a network of active, doing individuals. There are various ways to create this community. For instance, I once formed a group of like minded people I met at workshops. We regularly hung out outside of training sessions, attending concerts, socializing, and even celebrating holidays together. By immersing myself in this new environment, I surrounded myself with people who were equally passionate about growth and action. However, be cautious of falling into a social circle filled with idle chatter and gossip. It's crucial to find or create a community of doers rather than talkers. Another fantastic solution is to engage in mastermind groups. You can form mini teams with like minded individuals, starting with just 4 people and expanding as needed. In these groups, you should meet regularly, whether in person or via online platforms like Skype with video. During these meetings, each person shares what has happened in their lives, seeking advice or assistance, and supporting one another with insights and experiences. The key is to find active, action oriented people who are also committed to personal development. It's perfectly fine to explore different topics. What matters is that everyone in the group is focused on taking action. This third tool can have a tremendous impact on your growth journey. Fourth tool, harnessing the power of influential figures. The fourth tool, which is crucial during the initial stages of self development, is what I call field distortion. This concept arises when you find an author or mentor who embodies a strong personality and creates an environment that fundamentally alters your thinking and decision making. In their presence, you perceive things differently and are inspired to approach problems from new angles. Yet outside of this influence, you may struggle to replicate that mindset. It's natural to want to learn from this person, to emulate their behavior, and to absorb their insights, just as children learn through imitation. This is a powerful phase of growth. Therefore, the fourth tool is to immerse yourself in the presence of such influential figures as much as possible. Keep in mind that this approach is particularly beneficial during the first and second stages of your development. Later, in the third stage, you will need to gradually detach yourself from this distorting field. At that point, it's essential to cultivate your own independent thinking without relying solely on external influences. For now, however, leverage this field distortion to maintain an external influence that shapes your mind in a direction conducive to your growth. Embracing discomfort for growth, it truly doesn't matter which area you choose to focus on, be it health, relationships, finances, communication skills, or time management. What's crucial is that you shift from a state of inaction to engaging in discomforting actions, fostering a relentless approach to implementation and ultimately achieving results. This is the objective of this stage. Results can manifest in any field. The key is to start moving from a standstill. For example, my journey began in communication simply because that was the first training I attended. From there, I explored emotional management, personal development, success strategies, time management, and a plethora of other topics. At this initial level, the specific focus is irrelevant. What matters is the momentum you create by confronting discomfort, taking action, and implementing what you learn. Push yourself beyond your comfort zone, embrace the challenge, and watch as progress unfolds. Chapter 2: The second stage of self development: characteristics. In the first stage, we looked at collecting and belonging. The second stage is about getting out of your rut. During this stage, while the first stage involves a person collecting various methods and feeling a sense of connection to self development, in the second stage, individuals start to take real action. They've developed a sort of relentless implementation mindset and they just go for it. By this point, they've attended numerous workshops, read plenty of books, and are starting to see diverse results. Often, as they engage in self development, improvements start to emerge in different areas of their lives. They might notice better relationships, financial progress, and enhanced communication skills. There's a lot happening. Even their health improves, and life becomes more interesting overall. What happens at this stage? The phase of getting out of your rut naturally occurs when you've applied the concepts I discussed in the first stage. Now, in the second stage, your task is a bit different. To transition from the getting out of your rut phase, you need to establish a solid foundation. This is somewhat easier since the main challenge lies in the first stage. So, what do you do in the second stage? You start by outlining various areas of your life: money, relationships, health, time management, lifestyle, communication, like minded friends, and more. These are the life domains you'll focus on. For each area, you'll write down a basic level of what you need. This isn't about setting lofty goals that you plan to achieve in 5, 10, or even 50 years. Instead, it's about identifying what you realistically need to address in the near term. For instance, determine how much money you need to earn, what kind of relationships you want, what your basic health needs are, and how you want to manage your time. In essence, you'll establish these baseline levels for every area of your life. As you continue this relentless approach to implementation, you'll start to achieve this basic level you've set for yourself. At this stage, it's still perfectly fine to attend 100 to 500 workshops. As long as they are high quality, you choose them wisely, and the facilitators provide that transformative environment you need. So, during this second stage, attending workshops is still beneficial, similar to the first stage, with the caveat that you must also focus on implementation and have a solid support system. What are the distinguishing features of the second stage? Here, the process of implementation becomes somewhat less chaotic and begins to take on a more organized structure. So, if during the first stage you were, as my friend Peter puts it, fired up about everything and just diving into everything, then in the second stage, you start to incorporate more thoughtful decision making into the mix. You begin to steer your efforts a bit more. You've outlined what your basic needs are, and now you're starting to focus your self development efforts. You're still integrating a lot, but specific areas of emphasis begin to emerge. This is the second stage. At this stage, it's crucial to start thinking about your life strategy. While it was also important in the first stage, it becomes critical now. Why? Because you're directing your self development and your relentless pursuit of integration. To ensure that your enthusiastic integration doesn't lead you astray, you need to establish your strategy. With a clear strategy in place, the skill of relentless integration that you developed in the first stage can be directed toward the right goals in this stage. To summarize the second stage, you attend many workshops, start seeing results, and your main goal is to solidify these gains. Chapter 3, Third Stage of Self Development, Tool Based Solutions. Moving on, when you transition to the third stage, significant changes occur. Be very attentive. I refer to this stage as tool based solutions. At this point, you'll find that you attend fewer workshops, but you achieve more results. What happens at this stage? You have addressed your basic needs. Remember, in the second stage, I mentioned the importance of establishing a foundational level across all areas of your life. Well, at the third stage, you've met those basic needs, and your further development is solely determined by your life strategy. You will select workshops and seminars that align specifically with your strategic goals. You'll assess what tools you need to solve particular challenges and invest in training that provides those tools. For me, training in editing and writing is a tool based task. It's not about personal growth for its own sake. It's about acquiring the skills necessary to support my objectives and align with my strategy. What else is characteristic of this stage? At this point, individuals typically develop a habit of solving problems with money. Why? Because their basic needs are met, and once that happens, people start to value their time. They often monitor how they spend their time and keep track of it. As a result, they begin to address issues by investing money. When you start valuing your time more than money, you tend to solve problems with financial resources. This is one of the indicators of the third stage. Another criterion for this stage is that you've established a solid foundation across all areas of your life. You're no longer moving from a bad situation to a good one, but rather from good to better. This is another sign of the third stage. At this stage, it's essential to begin reducing the number of workshops and the influx of information you consume. While it's not critical yet, it's becoming necessary. To effectively implement your strategy and manage your time, you need to cut down on training sessions and information intake. Otherwise, you run the risk of being pulled in many directions by endless workshops, seminars, self help courses, and the constant urge to read more books. I won't say this applies to everyone, but it's true for the majority of people. This is the essence of the third stage. To summarize, the tasks at this stage include transitioning to solving problems with money, selecting personal development activities tailored to specific needs, and choosing workshops and seminars as tools for addressing those needs. Our self development should align with our life strategy. It should flow directly from it. We also need to reduce the number of workshops, training sessions, and the overall intake of information. We will discuss information isolation further. At the third stage, it's time to gradually move toward information isolation and decrease the number of workshops we attend. Naturally, at this stage, unlike in the first two stages, where having a mentor guiding you by the hand is still acceptable, it's time to avoid mentors altogether. No more mentors, please. To move forward effectively, you need to rely on your own thinking. Any consultations at this stage should be seen as one off events. You might meet with someone for advice occasionally, and that's perfectly fine. However, this shouldn't involve regular guidance or mentorship. Rather, it should be sporadic consultations. You can decide when you feel the need to discuss something with a particular person and schedule a consultation with them. After that, you act independently until new questions or requests accumulate, at which point you can return for another consultation. Fourth level, being in the field. At this level, you attend very few workshops. And when you do, there are typically two scenarios. Either you're addressing a specific tool based challenge, or you're engaging in an environment where you want to simply be in the field of a particular individual. For example, this is no longer about someone who constantly shapes your thinking, but rather a person from whom you want to enhance certain qualities or states within yourself. This could be traits like speed, activity, and productivity, or conversely, calmness and serenity, whatever it may be. You seek out a strong individual who exemplifies the quality you want to develop. It doesn't matter what the theme of their training or seminar is. You might even just go to them for a consultation and spend a day simply chatting about anything, just to be in their presence. This is the essence of the fourth level. So, at this level, you either tackle specific challenges or immerse yourself in the energy of the right person. It's a combination of tool based solutions plus occasional moments of being in the field. The process of personal development at this stage transitions into a background presence, a sort of ambient personal growth. At this stage, your primary goal is strict information isolation and careful selection of the sources you consume. Regarding personal development, I've already mentioned how you approach workshops. You may attend for two specific reasons. There's also a noteworthy aspect of personal development that applies at any level. It's not a standalone stage, but rather an option or bonus: curiosity and socializing. No matter what phase you're in, you have the opportunity to satisfy your curiosity and mingle with interesting people. This aspect is entirely self sufficient. If you feel the need to satisfy your curiosity, you can attend a workshop that may not be necessary for your growth, simply because you're interested. If you want to socialize and acknowledge that, you can go to a workshop for that purpose. However, you must be clear that socializing is the goal in this case, and you shouldn't expect any specific results from the workshop. You should frame it as, I just want to socialize. This becomes a distinct and separate objective. Chapter 4: Where am I and what should I do? Here are the functions of the personal development stages. What you need to understand is to clearly identify your current stage, the tasks you have at this stage, and what you need to transition to the next one. If we consider the overall goal of training as a move toward background personal development, this stage structure is essential to achieving that. By progressing through these stages, you will arrive at background personal development. I'll explain how this process unfolds, but essentially, these four stages are sufficient. If you simply follow these four stages, you can reach background personal development even without my assistance. This four-stage system is structured to guide you toward that goal. That's the first task. The second task, related to this block, is that whenever you attend a training, you should clearly recall which stage you're currently in and what specific motivation you have for attending. Are you at the first stage, attending this training because you feel indifferent and just need to dive in? Or are you at the third stage, seeking tools that this training offers? Maybe you're at the third or fourth stage, wanting to immerse yourself in the presence of a particular person and absorb their energy. You need to be aware of your motivation. You might even tell yourself, I don't care. I'm going to this training simply out of curiosity. There's nothing wrong with that. If you have the money and can afford it, why not go? Just like you would go to a movie out of curiosity. I don't expect that the new series of Batman or Spider Man is going to make me richer or help me grow personally or spiritually. I just think they're fun. Similarly, if I'm going to this training because I think it'll be enjoyable, that's perfectly fine too, as long as I'm honest with myself about it. So, these are the two tasks you have regarding this four-stage system of personal development functions. Chapter 5: Instrumental Self Development. Selecting materials. There are several things that support instrumental self development, and a few that aid background self development. This is what we will discuss now. First, let's discuss content selection. What should you pay attention to when choosing materials? It's easiest to focus on content, which can be either specific information or the author's perspective. When it comes to content, it's quite straightforward. It can serve various purposes. This includes instrumental information, motivation, or a mental shift. For instance, some books may not provide direct tools but can shift your mindset by conveying the right concepts. If you know in advance what task you need to address, you won't be overwhelmed by everything available. Instead, you should ask yourself, what do I need right now? Instrumental information? Motivation? A mental shift? As you progress through the levels, you'll find that you need a mental shift more and less instrumental information. When selecting content without considering the author, a key indicator for me is the resonance you feel. As you engage in self development and advance through these levels, you'll develop an intuitive sense of what resonates with you. You pick up a book, flip through its pages, and realize, oh, I get it. This excites me. I really want to dive into it. I'm genuinely interested. I'll briefly touch on how to engage with content, but fundamentally, it's about resonance. This is key when selecting your materials. Now, let's discuss choosing an author. You should also understand that authors serve different purposes, and you need to clarify what task you are addressing through them. For example, different authors can fulfill various roles, providing tools, serving as a role model or a source of inspiration, or reminding you of important concepts. They may not introduce new information, but instead rephrase what you often forget, presenting old ideas from a fresh perspective. A fourth role is helping you cultivate the desired state of mind, whether it's clarity, inner peace, consciousness, activity, or the ability to overcome discomfort. By engaging with this author and consuming their materials, regardless of the format, you find yourself experiencing these states. Lastly, a fifth purpose could simply be entertainment, fun, or a substitute for watching TV. This is also a valid objective. So, when you decide what to focus on, whether it's a training session, seminar, book, video materials, or a conference, you need to ask yourself, who is the author? What tasks can this author help me solve? And do I need these solutions? It's possible you might be attracted to the flashy packaging of a conference, hoping it will provide you with tools. However, the format may be different, and the speakers might primarily focus on reminding you of important concepts and serving as role models, if they even do that at all. Most of the time, they offer entertainment, fun, or a substitute for watching TV. You might pick up a book expecting it to motivate you, only to find it's just dry, straightforward information, or vice versa. Before you dive into any material, content, or self development resource, ask yourself, what is my task from these five categories, and does this resource help me achieve it? By doing this, you'll immediately eliminate about 80% of all the training sessions, seminars, and books because they serve different purposes. This serves as your first filter. The next filter for selecting authors is authenticity. If you have even a basic understanding of nonverbal communication, you can easily distinguish between an authentic, congruent author and one who comes across as artificial, like a plastic doll, acting in a forced or exaggerated manner. Your goal is to seek out natural individuals, those who are relaxed and not overly eager to please everyone. Interestingly, there's a tendency for genuinely skilled professionals who are confident in their expertise to behave more calmly. They don't feel the need to win everyone over. On the other hand, those who lack confidence in their competence often appear jittery and try too hard to gain approval from others. Recently, I spoke at a conference, and it was a perfect example. A person came up on stage, and he was just overwhelmingly positive in a way that made you want to throw a shoe at him. It was hard to believe him. He was unnatural and inauthentic. You wouldn't communicate like that with your friends. When you meet your friends at a restaurant for a casual chat, you don't behave that way. You wouldn't use such formal language or have those filler words in your speech. You might say things like, but you wouldn't start with hello, friends, colleagues. Well, it's great, excellent, wonderful, yes, colleagues. Those types of filler words only emerge when someone is trying too hard to present themselves in a certain way. The goal is to filter out all that plastic waste and look for authentic people. Generally, a person's naturalness indicates their confidence in their competence. Of course, it's possible for someone to appear very confident, but actually be incompetent. However, on average, this filter helps distinguish good authors from the fluff. A nuance to consider. There are times when a person is very confident but is actually offering poor content. And there are also cases where someone might be anxious and jittery, but is, in fact, an excellent specialist. Unfortunately, you can only discern these subtleties with experience or through authoritative recommendations. Overall, though, this filter of naturalness is a powerful tool for narrowing down to credible authors. This is the second filter. The third filter is very simple, a role model. Do I want to be like this person? At least in some way. The straightforward principle here is to ask yourself if it matters to you what topic you're listening to from this individual. If you're willing to attend any training led by a trainer, it means they meet your role model filter. A role model is somewhat similar to the idea of being in a field, but it's not exactly the same. If you're open to listening to someone on any topic, that's a good sign. This is the third filter. The fourth filter concerns strong personalities. This is about the field that distorts your reality. Some individuals may be competent specialists, but they have weak personalities. Their presence doesn't significantly distort your reality, and their influence on you is minimal. Listening to such a person is no more effective than reading a book with the same text. They don't impact you through their personality. Instead, they act more like a narrator, simply conveying information. Recently, we discussed that some time ago, my favorite woman attended an NLP training session with Pachujin in Arizona. You might love or dislike Pachujin, but he is in general a pretty strong individual. She mentioned, it's not that I like Pachujin, but at least he's quite powerful. On the first day of the training, another guy was leading it. I know who it was, but I won't name him since I prefer not to speak ill of people publicly. He was just mediocre. Later, she said, I'm considering attending the next level. It seems interesting and useful, but Pachujin won't be leading it. That guy who was mediocre is going to lead it. I replied, but he doesn't come across as a strong individual. He doesn't have much influence on you as a person. She acknowledged, yeah, he doesn't resonate with me at all. So, I guess I won't go. In other words, if a person doesn't come across as a strong individual, it's better to just find a book on the subject because the effectiveness will be the same. The key indicator here is that if, after being around someone or having contact with them, you find yourself thinking, feeling, or acting differently, then that person has an influence on you. They distort your reality through their presence. The fifth filter is that they don't waste time. A good specialist you want to listen to in training sessions doesn't fill their content with fluff. In fact, they avoid fluff even in their promotional materials. This person is valuable either by providing direct, practical insights or by being a strong role model or reminding you of important, well known concepts. But they don't include any unnecessary filler. Fluff is pretty straightforward, and I'm sure you get the idea. Just to clarify, if you start listening to a presenter, heaven forbid during a webinar or just a video online, and they're sharing cliches you've heard from countless others, that's a fluff presenter. If someone is offering fluff from the start, it's a sign that more fluff will follow. If a trainer is genuinely insightful and capable of creating meaningful content, you'll notice that in everything they do, even in their free materials and promotional content, this quality will shine through in their promotional videos, their marketing texts, and their email newsletters. I'm currently horrified by the state of the market. First of all, there's a lot of low quality content out there. Second, it's multi-layered low quality. You see fluff and free materials in promotional videos and in email newsletters. Take newsletters, for example. Hey, dear friend, check out our new training with a 150% discount. Looking at all of this, I can't help but think of that planet in Interstellar, the one covered in water with massive waves. Right now, our market feels like that. It's just a sea of low quality content with only a few islands of value that you need to reach before the tide pulls you under. So, here are some straightforward criteria to help you navigate this landscape. Your task is to train your instincts. Start by checking out a new speaker, a trendy topic, or an author. Look for some free content they've put out there. Over time, you'll develop a knack for sniffing out the fluff, recognizing what's simply common knowledge. You need to learn to differentiate between generic advice, like you should set goals and they should be specific and measurable, which has been recycled since 1905, and genuine insights that people create from their own experiences. I shared an interesting analogy in the promotional video for this training about how training programs can be created in two ways: using your brain, or, well, from the rear end. When you use your brain, you're generating original ideas and insights. But when you create from your rear end, you're essentially just digesting information you've consumed, processing it, and then regurgitating it as what you might call a unique training. Your task is to learn to distinguish between this regurgitation and true brain work. A simple sign to look for is your own experience in self development. You should be able to recognize what constitutes common knowledge. This awareness will help you sift through the noise and find genuinely valuable content. So, the idea of writing a to do list for the day, or pursuing what you love, finding your calling, or doing what makes you happy is often presented as the key to success. If you hear some of this common knowledge as an entry point, chances are you're not going to find anything more profound. It's likely to be just as basic, stretched out over time, and at a higher price. Your task is to learn how to differentiate between genuine insights and surface level advice. If you want to practice this skill, take a look at various sales texts, emails, and videos and evaluate whether they offer common knowledge or something more original. Ask yourself, was this created from genuine thought, or is it just recycled material? One of my esteemed teachers, who has since passed away, once articulated this very well. His name was P. Art Logus. He looked up the search queries that led people to him and found one that caught his attention. Art Logus Plus, where does he get his information? He wrote an entire article explaining that information is not just taken from somewhere, it's also created. He emphasized that a good specialist should be a creator of information. On the other hand, a journalist or announcer simply relays information. It's crucial to learn how to distinguish between announcers and true authors, those who genuinely create content rather than merely retell it. I've shared some fundamental criteria and how to practice discerning the right authors. When it comes to recommendations, not all of them are worth listening to. Some endorsements can be bought. For instance, if you come across a review for a health product and it's from the head of a natural medicine association, it might be a paid endorsement, and this doesn't necessarily mean the product is bad. Recommendations can be bought for subpar products, they can be purchased for excellent ones, or they can be genuine for both good and bad products. So, approach recommendations with caution. It's always better when someone you know personally makes a recommendation. In that case, ask yourself, does this person truly understand the topic? Are they successful in this area? If the answer is yes, then that recommendation holds weight and it's worth considering. If some random person tells me, hey, there's this amazing copywriting workshop with 25 killer tips for persuasive writing, I immediately dismiss it. Spam folder goodbye. When you hear a recommendation, it's ideal if you know the person personally, and B, just as importantly, they are competent in that area. Look for recommendations from knowledgeable individuals rather than abstract reviews from random strangers. Next up, credentials. This should be pretty clear to you, it's often just fluff. All those certificates, memberships, and associations, and other nonsense, membership in an association can be easily bought. Usually, it's a paid membership, so any specialist can just pay for it. You could get a membership in some obscure, eye popping association complete with a shiny certificate. The same goes for reviews. They can vary greatly. Sometimes, reviews are written by copywriters, fake testimonials. Other times, a review may seem decent, but the product itself is terrible. For example, if a newbie in self development, a total training virgin, attends a seminar, they might find everything amazing because they've never been exposed to these concepts before. They might say, "Wow, this was so helpful. These tips are brand new to me." On the flip side, many top professionals don't have any reviews at all. I've seen this quite often. Sometimes you come across someone who is incredibly knowledgeable and skilled, but they have no testimonials because they simply don't collect them. Or they might ask for feedback, but no one leaves a review. It's just that they lack a system for gathering testimonials, even though they're a great specialist. So, I don't put much stock in reviews. If I see them in a sales pitch, I usually skip reading them. The exception to this rule is recommendations from knowledgeable individuals. If someone I respect in the field endorses a professional, that carries significant weight for me. Here are the criteria we use for selecting materials and authors, and you can practice and refine your skills with them. As I mentioned earlier, take a piece of content and mentally evaluate it against the criteria I've outlined. You can either re listen to the content or jot down a checklist of these criteria for reference. Run it through your mental filter. What's the level of authenticity? Is this person a role model? Do they have a strong personality? Is the content common knowledge or original? Are there recommendations? And does this content or author align with my goals? This is my system for filtering materials. Since I've been doing this for a long time, it's deeply ingrained in me, allowing me to quickly gauge an author's level and expertise after just a minute of watching or skimming through a video. With experience, you'll get there too. Some of you might already be adept at this. For those who aren't yet, I encourage you to take this as a practice exercise, just like I've explained, to hone your skills. Chapter 6, Layered Filtering. In the previous section, we discussed how to select materials effectively. Now, let's dive into a simple yet powerful technique I call layered filtering. Many people, often shaped by the habits instilled in them during school, approach materials the same way, from cover to cover. While this might be true for some, it's a habit that can hold you back. The belief that a book must be read entirely stems from a time when access to information was limited and every piece of knowledge felt precious. Today, that mindset is outdated. When it comes to evaluating a book, a more efficient approach exists. First, take a look at the cover, title, and synopsis. This should take no more than 40 seconds. Then, skim the table of contents for about 2 minutes. After that, quickly browse through the book, glancing at headings, diagrams, and key points. This method allows you to create a mental overview of the book without getting bogged down in unnecessary details. Only after this initial filtering, if you find something that truly resonates or seems useful, should you dive deeper into those specific sections. This layered approach not only saves time, but also helps you extract valuable insights without the pressure of having to read every word. I first heard about this layered filtering technique from Tony Robbins. He humorously described how to approach books, comparing them to monsters that are ready to devour your time and eat away several days of your life. His advice? Look at this monster from all angles. Start with the table of contents, and then focus on the sections that matter to you. Essentially, glance through the book to grasp the overall idea before diving into the parts you find relevant. Now, let's shift our focus to training programs. They generally fall into two categories. First, I'm not talking about in person workshops where you're physically present. Those have their own set of recommendations. When attending live training, seek out authors who meet all your criteria and ideally have the ability to transform your perception and energy field. This is the gold standard. I still do this myself. Whenever I need external input for refreshment or want to immerse myself in a certain environment, I prioritize attending live sessions whenever possible. For online training programs, there are two main formats: those that are long and require assignments, and those that deliver content all at once. Examples of the former include programs like the Money Matrix, the Sci Business System, and the Personal Finance System, PFS. These are extensive, in depth training programs designed to provide a comprehensive learning experience over a longer period. I recommend enrolling in long term training programs only in exceptional cases. This should only happen if you have complete trust in the trainer, they meet all your criteria, and the training topic is relevant to you. Alternatively, if you know you're willing to listen to that author discuss any subject, then it might be worth considering. However, if the trainer raises any doubts or if you're unsure, please avoid committing to lengthy programs. These courses demand a much greater level of engagement, time, and attention. Therefore, only join if you're confident that this person will provide valuable insights and that the content is essential for you. Remember, there's a significant difference between spending half a day attending a concise training session and committing to a month-and-a-half course. The latter represents a much larger investment of your time and energy, making it crucial to assess your decision carefully. When it comes to training programs offered in one package, the approach varies based on the trainer's credibility. If you know the author is reputable and you've taken their courses before, feel free to listen from start to finish without hesitation. However, if the training or the author seems questionable and you're unsure whether it's beneficial for you, do not attempt to go through the entire program from beginning to end. In such cases, apply the same strategy you would use for books. Start by reading the promotional text and any available training program outlines. Watch the promo videos and skim through any files, diagrams, or supplementary materials. This way, you can quickly grasp the structure of the training. Once you understand the overall framework, focus only on the specific sections that you find relevant, especially for skills-based training programs. They may contain valuable content, but not all of it will apply to your needs. By understanding the structure first, you can hone in on the pieces that are most pertinent to you. This layered approach to processing information is fundamentally simple and can save you a significant amount of time. It allows you to move away from the outdated habit of consuming content from cover to cover. Reserve that thorough method only for your favorite authors whose work you trust and know will provide value throughout. It's similar to going to see your favorite movie. If a new installment of something you love, like Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Part 3, comes out, you'll watch it from beginning to end without skipping anything. You're invested and want to experience every moment. However, if you come across a new online training course on copywriting, your approach will be different. You'll carefully examine the structure of the course, and chances are you'll skip around and listen only to the parts that are relevant to you. Likely about 80% of it won't apply to your needs. This layered approach to processing information helps you focus on what truly matters while maximizing your time and resources. It's about engaging deeply with what you love while being selective and efficient with unfamiliar content. Chapter 7: Working with Materials. In this chapter, we'll explore how to effectively process materials. I'll share some comprehensive recommendations and also reference specific techniques that require separate training to master. The first method you should adopt when working with any material is what I call X-ray thinking. This approach involves extracting 120% of the meaning from a text, training, or any other resource. Your goal is to understand the material more deeply than the author intended. To achieve this, I recommend using 3 essential tools. The first tool is called SLAT, which stands for Structural Logical Analysis of Text. I learned about SLAT from Nikolai Ivanovich Kozlov, who I've mentioned several times. This skill helps you perceive the internal framework of a text, allowing you to see it not just as a collection of words and sentences, but as a structure composed of different meaningful elements. With SLAT, you can distinguish between the skeleton of the text, the meat that carries the main ideas, and the fat that can be ignored. I won't go into the details of SLAT here, as it requires at least 4 hours to explain fully. However, you can explore it further on your own. A quick online search might lead you to valuable resources, including some materials directly from Nikolai Ivanovich himself. Your goal is to master two key components: thematic analysis and structural identification. In thematic analysis, you'll learn to differentiate between the theme, the main idea, and the ream, the information provided about that idea, within a text. The second component involves identifying the structure of the text, including classic elements such as thesis, antithesis, justification, illustrations, and conclusions. Familiarizing yourself with these structural elements will allow you to extract more value from any text. By developing this skill, you'll be able to identify the extraneous information that can be ignored, which speeds up your comprehension. Additionally, you'll gain a clearer view of the key points, enabling you to delve deeper and understand the material better than the author intended. This is the first tool, SLAT. The second tool is graphic thinking. When dealing with complex information, it's often more effective to visualize it using diagrams, charts, or sketches. You can draw by hand on paper or create digital representations on your computer. Creating a graphic representation can greatly simplify your understanding of complicated concepts. Ideally, if you have access to infographics related to the topic, use those as they can provide a clear and concise summary of the information. The third tool is mind mapping, but with a crucial caveat. For X-ray thinking, a mind map isn't just a typical mind map where you throw in everything as sentences, paragraphs, and snippets. Instead, it should follow the classic principles laid out by the pioneers of mind mapping. Before mind mapping became widespread, Tony Buzan and his brother Barry published a book detailing the concept. In their framework, mind maps are created according to specific rules. For instance, each branch should contain only one word. These guidelines stimulate additional thinking in your brain. If you want to understand material more deeply than the author did, applying the X-ray thinking principle, you need to construct your mind map following Buzan's classical approach rather than merely summarizing in a typical mind map format. This approach is fundamentally different from just taking notes. If you haven't read Buzan's book, I highly recommend it because explaining it in detail would require a separate training session. It's packed with valuable insights and examples of mind maps. So, we have three tools: structural logical analysis of text, SLAT, graphic thinking, and classic mind mapping according to Buzan. When you combine these techniques, you create a powerful system for X-ray thinking. One of these tools may resonate with you more than the others, or you might find value in using all three. Experiment and see what works best for you. The result is clear. These tools enable you to gain a deeper understanding of the material than the author might have intended. This applies not only to text, but also to videos and trainings, which are essentially just spoken forms of text. This is the essence of X-ray thinking. Now, let's move on to the next part. Next, I want to introduce a concept I call the anti-student. Many people who went through traditional education, especially in the past, develop a counterproductive habit of taking notes during lectures. Personally, I never wrote notes in college. In fact, I rarely even attended lectures. The problem with this habit is that it often leads to mindless note taking. In college, you might have been sitting through lectures filled with minimal useful information. Then, when you attend a training session, your brain automatically reverts to that lecture frame of mind. The trainer begins to speak, and instead of actively engaging with the material, some attendees start scribbling notes as if they were back in a lecture hall. I've noticed this during various trainings. For instance, just last week, I attended a writing workshop where a woman next to me was writing down everything the instructor said. Much of it was not critical information, yet she seemed more focused on her notepad than on truly absorbing the material. So here's the task: break free from this outdated lecture habit. Writing everything down during a training won't help you remember or understand the concepts. Instead, it distracts you from processing the information in real time. To get the most out of a training session, you need to think critically about what you're learning and perhaps even ask questions. Simply writing down every word doesn't facilitate this kind of engagement. So, what do we do about this? First, when you're attending a training, find out if a recording will be available afterward. If there's a presentation, ask if it will be shared with attendees. Check whether there are handouts, mind maps, or any supplementary materials provided. Next, instead of taking standard notes, create a mind map. This means you won't be jotting down everything word for word, which often leads to poor understanding and retention. Instead, focus on capturing key ideas and concepts that trigger those aha moments. Include actionable tools for implementation, checklists, and any important lists relevant to the material. What shouldn't you include in your mind map? Avoid filling it with irrelevant details, fluff, or statements that are just common knowledge. Instead, aim to document only what truly adds value. You can also streamline your process by sending tasks directly to your to-do list or delegating them to team members. There's no need to write down everything. Just note the essentials. Another cheat code I like to use is what I call borrowing from the pro. If you need notes from a session, look for someone who excels at mind mapping. If they're doing it well, they likely have a digital version readily available. Often, people are happy to share their notes, so don't hesitate to ask. If you notice someone at the training creating great mind maps, simply approach them and say, "Could you please share your mind map with me?" It's a much more efficient way to gather the important information without getting bogged down in unnecessary note taking. Moving on, let's talk about my approach to note taking. I do take notes, but I keep it minimal. I only jot down thoughts that are truly essential, rather than trying to capture everything happening in the session. This way, when I focus on the key points, I have the mental space to think critically and engage in the training. If I try to write down everything, I turn into a stenographer and I lose my understanding of the material. Now, regarding information organization, I recommend keeping certain types of information easily accessible. This includes your mind maps, any presentation slides, as they can be quickly skimmed, and diagrams. Crucially, all this should be stored in the cloud. It shouldn't be buried on your hard drive in some obscure folder. Use a reliable cloud service. For example, I use Dropbox for file storage and MindMeister for my mind maps. I have to give credit to Maxim Jabali for introducing me to MindMeister. At first, I was a bit hesitant, like a cat scared of a vacuum cleaner, but eventually I got used to it. Now, we keep everything on MindMeister, both corporate and personal projects. It's become an integral part of our workflow. So, everything should be in cloud storage. The ideology here is simple: throw away all your paper notes and notebooks. Seriously, get rid of them. Burn them in honor of Cthulhu. You're never going to revisit those notes. They're just clutter that follows you from move to move. Digital notes? You probably won't revisit those either. But if you ever need something, you want to have that mind map easily accessible. What does this mean in practice? Imagine you're on the subway and you want to recall an idea from a training session. If that idea is scribbled in a notebook at home, forget it. It's lost. If it's on your computer in a file, again, you won't be able to access it. But if that idea is saved in a mind map on your iPad, you can pull it out during your subway ride and check it out whenever you need. It's all about having those ideas at your fingertips for when inspiration strikes unexpectedly. Now, here's another hack: the magic savings jar. As you browse the internet, you come across interesting articles and think, "I need to study this more closely." What usually happens? That page gets left open in your browser or buried in bookmarks, and you remind yourself with a sticky note that says, "Read this later." Instead, use Evernote and the Web Clipper. Whenever you find an article that catches your eye, just clip it into Evernote. You can also record useful conversations on your phone and save them there too. So, you have what I call a magic savings jar. When you're browsing the internet and come across interesting articles or resources, instead of letting them pile up in your browser bookmarks or writing yourself a sticky note that says, read this later, you save them in Evernote using the web clipper feature. This way, you can easily organize all the articles, conversations, or useful discussions you want to revisit later. What's the philosophy behind this magic savings jar? In reality, you probably won't need most of the information you save, and you may never revisit it. But having that jar gives your brain a sense of calm, knowing that there's a dedicated place for all the useful stuff you encounter along the way. My information organization philosophy 1: use quickly absorbable formats. The first principle is to utilize formats that allow for fast comprehension. Think mind maps, presentations, and diagrams. Ensure they are always available in cloud storage, making them easy to access whenever needed. 2. Declutter your information space. The second principle involves clearing out any unnecessary items from your information landscape. Throw away all your paper notebooks and anything else that isn't essential. Keep only digital information that's readily accessible and in a format that suits your needs. 3. Create a single magic savings jar. The third principle is about maintaining a single magic savings jar where you collect everything you find interesting or useful. If you need something in the future, you can easily retrieve it from this central repository. Don't scatter these useful bits of information across different platforms, such as bookmarks in your browser, files on your desktop, or Word documents. Keep it all in one place to avoid confusion. By adhering to these principles, you can effectively declutter your information management system and ensure that everything you might need is organized and easily accessible. It doesn't matter how many notes you have in Evernote, whether it's 100 or 100,000. Just dump everything into one notebook or folder in Evernote. This way, you declutter your information space. Although I haven't mentioned it directly yet, this practice indirectly contributes to informational cleanliness and isolation. By consolidating your notes, you reduce the amount of external information and distractions that can affect you. When all your interesting insights are stored in one place, you eliminate excess clutter. No more stacks of notebooks sitting in your closet. This simplification keeps everything readily accessible if you ever need it. It helps you maintain a clear state of mind, allowing your brain to achieve a state of clarity. This block covers material processing, X-ray thinking, SLAT, graphic analysis, and mind mapping, as well as the concept of the anti-student, how to take effective notes, and information organization. We'll focus on the right formats, cloud accessibility, eliminating paper, and creating a magical repository. By following these practices, you'll have information available in a convenient format that's quickly accessible at any moment, resulting in less clutter and a cleaner mind. Chapter 8: Tools. Companion. I've shared with you about working with materials. Let's cover two more small sections to wrap up the topic of instrumental self-development, and then we can take a break. The next two pieces are companion and graphic representation. Companion. What is this? I've already mentioned that it's better not to develop alone. It's beneficial to have colleagues, a mastermind group, or like-minded individuals. But the fastest way, and we will discuss this further in the context of background self-development, is when a close person also participates in the self-development process. How can this be done? First, many people, especially women, struggle with this. This is purely an observation based on psychological differences. Women are more often drawn to self-development. Once they become engrossed in self-development, they say, okay, now I'm all developed and I know that I need to set goals and write tasks in a to-do list, and that a woman should be feminine. Now I need to push my partner to join a training so he can develop too. Men also sometimes find themselves in a similar situation in the opposite direction, but it's much rarer. Usually, women are the first to attend trainings and then lead their partners to these trainings to help them develop. That's the general trend, but it can happen in either direction. So, it's desirable to involve your close person in the self development process. But what does it mean to involve them if they don't want to? The first thing you need to understand is the answer to the question, how can I help my loved ones develop or get my husband interested in trainings? The answer is you can't. You cannot develop your loved ones. They have to do it themselves. However, you can facilitate this process only if the person has their own interest and direction. Now, how can you do this correctly? Most people, for reasons I don't know, start trying to fix their loved ones, teach them, or shove things down their throats. In other words, they annoy them with their ideas. Naturally, the effect is the opposite. Leave me alone with your nonsense. I don't want to listen to this. To avoid this, there's another strategy. This strategy of annoying the person will kill the desire for self development, and you won't be able to form a partnership even with someone who has a vector for self improvement. If a person has this vector, how can you use it to become companions in self development? You stop trying to fix, teach, or shove ideas down their throat. Instead, here are a few definitions. Share thoughts, seek advice, discuss your experiences, and reflect on your experiences together with your companion. And if the person gets engaged, you then only strengthen that engagement. It's all about this format. What does it mean to share thoughts? You talk in the evening over tea or while sitting on the couch. Not about the latest episode of Game of Thrones or how you stepped in something unpleasant or found 5,000 rubles on the road or ate lamb ribs and sauce. Those everyday things can be discussed too, but when those topics run out, you have an endless subject for conversation, self development. You talk about it specifically in the frames I mentioned. Share thoughts. I was thinking while driving. And you share your thoughts about yourself, people, the world, not about your companion and what they're doing poorly in their self development. You seek advice. Hey, what do you think is the best way to handle this? Or I'm stuck. I can't figure out what to do. So you talk about yourself, the world, life, and people, but not about your companion. You initiate discussions about your experiences, not theirs. I'm showing you the antithesis of typical mistakes here. A person starts attending training sessions and thinks they're now wise. However, they still haven't figured much out themselves, but they begin to nag their loved ones, telling them they're living incorrectly and need to change their lives. Naturally, everyone tells them to get lost. Instead, you share your thoughts, seek advice from the person, discuss your experiences with them, and reflect aloud on your own experiences rather than pointing out their mistakes, like how they didn't clean up after cooking or forgot to put the oil in the fridge. Only if the person gets engaged in this process and starts sharing their own experiences, reflecting on their feelings, telling you their thoughts, or finally asking for your advice, can you, at that triumphant moment, open your mouth and say something about your companion. This is a methodology that has been honed and refined over the years, not just by me. It's a checklist. Print it on your forehead or on your companion's forehead and absolutely do not violate it. Otherwise, you'll ruin your family with your self development, which often happens. Chapter 9, Gamification. We have a small piece left about gamification. I'm not an expert in this area. I'll just share how I approach it. You can also reach out to Maxim Jabali. He's been working on the topic of gamification for a long time and is a great master at it. My ideology here is very simple. Self development should be fun, not a form of self torture. Even if you're on the first or second level and your self development feels tough and uncomfortable, that doesn't prevent you from making it fun. Just like when an athlete swims through a cold strait, it may be uncomfortable, but it's still enjoyable. So, you should make your self development something that's fun and interesting, an engaging exploration of yourself. Think of it as a game. You can set up rewards for achievements. For instance, after completing a task, treat yourself to a slice of cake. You can also implement penalties for failures. That worked for me too, in terms of working with a controller. You can bring in a controller for yourself. You just join a group on social media, get in touch, exchange phone numbers just like we did in live training sessions. Here's a real example from our live training. When we cover the topic of skipping in our sessions, we pair people up and one person monitors the other. You're required to complete your skipping task daily and call your controller to report back. You read out the 10 affirmations you've written down, and you agree with your controller on what time you should call them. If you don't call, don't write, or don't complete your 10 affirmations, you pay them money. You also agree in advance on the penalty amount. In the end, everything tends to work out well. You push yourself toward a joyful and bright life. I did this myself once. If I was procrastinating on something for too long, I'd make an agreement with a friend. Listen, I need to get this done, and if I don't finish it by Tuesday, I'll pay, say, 5,000. It's not a life or death situation, but it's annoying. And that's it. You have that extra motivation behind you. Maybe your family budget won't be ruined if you have to pay that 5,000, but it'll be unpleasant. It's better to spend it on something useful or go to a restaurant and enjoy a nice meal. So, you turn this into a game with bonuses and penalties for failures. You can transform your tasks into personal quests. What works well for me is that I love beautiful design and aesthetics. I like to make everything look nice. Charts, cards back in the paper era, I made myself cards. I had pretty cards for tracking money and time, and I carried them in a cool box. Everyone would ask, "What's that? Tell me about it." So several goals were achieved. Now everything is digital. I create neat spreadsheets for tracking time and money, and everything is well organized. I enjoy it, and it works great. Many people get excited by gadgets and various programs, so they set up cool apps to track things like expenses. Find fun, interest, and enjoyment in this entire process. Make sure it's not a heavy burden of self improvement, but something enjoyable instead. The same goes for self development with a companion. It's really enjoyable. You can engage in self development while simply walking through the park with your loved one, allowing it to happen in the background. This is another way to incorporate fun into self development. In fact, it's not just about incorporating fun, it's about experiencing self development in a fun mode. That's how it works. We've now covered the section on instrumental self development, selecting materials, layered processing, X ray thinking, the anti student approach, organizing information, companionship, and gamification. This gives you a substantial set of supportive tools for your self development at the instrumental stage. Even if you've reached the fourth stage, these components can still be useful whenever you need instrumental development. Chapter 10: Background Self Development. We have one important block left on background self development. How do we translate this entire process into a background activity? At the beginning, I told you that if you initiate the work on the stages of self development, following the four stages, then this alone will be sufficient for you to arrive at background self development. After discussing instrumental self development, I will now cover a few elements that stimulate background self development. This is for your understanding and practice on how to accelerate this process, how to move through these four stages with greater comprehension, and how to reach background self development. If you were paying attention to my introductory videos for this course, I mentioned that the process of self development has been almost completely transitioned to the background for me. I hardly participate in any training, I barely read books, and I definitely don't attend any webinars. I don't engage in self development as such. When I look at my time allocation, there is almost no self development time. I even became curious about how much time I spent on personal development last year in total. Well, personal development, 17 hours over the course of a year. Last year, I spent 17 hours on self development. Maybe for some of you, self development is a hobby. It's enjoyable for you, and you don't need it to be anything more. But for those of you for whom self development takes more time than you would like and doesn't provide the desired results, this is relevant to you. If, on the other hand, you spend too much time ineffectively on training and other activities, this is your story. So, when you have gone through the stages of self development and reach the fourth stage, your self development will be minimal and usually reduced either to instrumental learning or just spending time in the company of others. This can occur simply through friendly interactions. You are already skilled enough to be friends with that person rather than being engaged in anything else. That's roughly how it works. If you follow the stages, you will essentially arrive at this point. Now, let's explore what else works within me to enable background self development. The first question we need to address is, what is self development? At some point, I began to ponder this, noticing that people engage in it as if they are personally growing or, heaven forbid, spiritually evolving. But what does it really mean? No one seems to be able to answer this question. We don't need to delve deeply into this right now. I will outline three practical levels of understanding what self development is. At the first level, it involves the development of a specific component of your personality. This could include your body, desires, skills, feelings, or cognitive abilities, such as logical thinking, intuition, attention, and concentration. It might also pertain to your worldview, thinking style, or personal strength. This encompasses your flexibility, degree of freedom, behavioral patterns, set beliefs, and standard reactions. These are all components that you can develop. This is the first level of what can be called self development. The second level I refer to as engineering the personality. What does this mean? We discuss this most closely in the personality processor and anti-crisis. It pertains to the question of internal leadership. I have already shared that navigating a crisis in any system and guiding the system through it is the leader's task. In an organization, this function is performed, for example, by the CEO or the owner if they are a leader, and their job is to guide the company through a crisis. In your personal life, your task is to be the leader for your own psyche and to navigate it through crises. So, what is a crisis? Let me provide you with a brief summary from a larger course. During a crisis, a system must undergo disintegration, essentially breaking down into pieces, and then reintegrate. It needs to reassemble itself in a new way. The system disintegrates to allow for this reconstruction. This occurs because the system, as it currently exists, no longer meets the demands placed upon it. The leader's task is to timely disintegrate the system and successfully reintegrate it into something new. If you lack internal leadership, you may not experience crises at all. I've mentioned before that an ordinary person typically encounters 3 to 4 crises in their lifetime. In contrast, a person who achieves outstanding results may go through around 50 crises in their lifetime. If you aspire to be an exceptional individual, you must ensure a sufficiently high frequency and speed of experiencing crises. However, you will only be able to navigate these effectively if you possess internal leadership, which enables disintegration and reintegration. Thus, the process of self development at the second level focuses on cultivating internal leadership. For a typical person lacking this internal leadership, it is often provided by external figures, parents, bosses, or gurus to whom they constantly turn. These individuals may attend trainings without perceiving them as genuinely beneficial. They merely seek to suck energy from these sessions. This approach is not very effective, as it indicates a lack of internal leadership. What I mentioned about the first and second stages, venturing into the discomfort zone and the obsessive integration. This whole narrative is precisely what frees you from dependence on any kind of guru and fosters internal leadership. In the second stage of self development, you begin to develop the beginnings of this internal leadership. You start to think independently about what you will focus on for your self improvement and how to optimize different areas of your life. At the third level, you will find it nearly impossible to proceed without internal leadership. This becomes even clearer at the fourth level. So, In the first and second levels, we are cultivating internal leadership. Gradually, this internal leadership transitions into external leadership. You become a strong individual, and your energy field begins to influence others. Your presence becomes powerful, and it impacts those around you. The third level of self development, following the first level of personality component development and the second level of internal leadership, is termed meta development or self awareness. Meta development consists of two parallel processes. The first process is that as you develop yourself and move further along your life journey, you start to understand yourself better. You uncover your characteristics, uniqueness, lifestyle, worldview, problem solving approaches, strengths, and weaknesses. This occurs through strategic work and navigating strategic milestones, which I've mentioned repeatedly in various trainings, as they are key to what I do. The second parallel process is shedding the superficial layers. This involves developing a state of awareness and removing automatic responses. These two processes run side by side. Shedding superficial layers, developing awareness, and uncovering uniqueness are interrelated parallel processes. Together, they constitute self awareness or meta development, and this is what I define as self development. What happens during this process? With each subsequent pass, with each new iteration, you gain a deeper understanding of yourself. You know who you are, what you are like, where you are going, what your values and principles are, what drives you in life, what you do, and what you never do. This is the awareness of yourself, your strengths, weaknesses, and uniqueness. Simultaneously, the superficial layers of unconsciousness are shed and automatic responses are removed. I've discussed this numerous times for those who may have lost track or are not familiar with the concept. What are automatic responses? They are quick, jerky reactions, emotional responses where you fail to hold back, as well as thought reactions. In communication, you may notice this in people who appear jittery. Their bodies and facial expressions twitch or move erratically while interacting with you. This indicates that they have a lot of automatic responses. On the other hand, someone with fewer automatic responses appears relaxed. Their face is calm and nothing twitches. This is a bodily manifestation of automatic responses. So stop being jittery. I mentioned this before. It was one of the best compliments I received. We were in Spain, where I was conducting consulting for a company. We were sitting at lunch with their team, and after getting to know each other over a few days, one of the women said to me, "Lynn, you are such a relaxed man." This is one of the best compliments you can receive because when someone gives you this kind of compliment in a good sense without any underlying meanings, it translates to you being aware and having few automatic responses. Secondly, it signifies that you are attractive. This compliment can be decoded in two parallel channels. This is part of the process, meta development. It's about clarifying who you are through strategic work and increasing your awareness. How do you achieve this? Through what technologies? The life strategy, which you all know, the personality processor, and self hacking. Many of you are familiar with these as well. When you engage in these practices, the outcome is that you free yourself from your own superficial layers. Consequently, external informational layers don't stick to you. As a result, you develop an internal information channel. You can create information for yourself and filter it with just a snap of your fingers. You become very clear about which information suits you and which is unnatural for you. Not long ago, I conducted an experiment where I intentionally planned and executed it. One evening, I sat down and spent 4 hours watching random YouTube videos, not educational ones, but just everything that popped up. You know how it is, you watch one video, and then at the end, it suggests more videos to check out. So, for 4 hours, I just clicked on whatever caught my attention. I went through scandals, intrigues, investigations, some political nonsense, a scientific story about singularity, conspiracy theories, and even shows like Let's Get Married. Just anything and everything. After 4 hours of consuming what most people typically watch, I woke up the next morning feeling terrible. First, I didn't feel well. Second, I carefully observed myself and noticed that I was filled with other people's thoughts. Their emotional states were entirely foreign to me. It felt as if I had consumed something that wasn't sitting right. I wanted to expel it. You know that feeling when you eat spoiled food and your body is trying to get rid of it? It was exactly like that, but in my head, with the information I had taken in, I was horrified by this realization. I thought to myself, what if people are watching YouTube or social media like this every day? They must feel this way constantly. I experienced a physical discomfort from having foreign information inside me. Fortunately, that feeling dissipated fairly quickly, within half a day, because my ability to shed unnecessary baggage works very well. The goal is to cultivate a high degree of self awareness so that foreign information doesn't cling to you. If you do encounter it, it should fall away quickly. This happens because you are conscious enough to recognize your uniqueness, your individuality, and your life strategy. This is key in self development as I understand it. Not at the initial stages, but as you transition to and continue your work at the fourth level of self development. That's where it operates effectively. Now, let's touch on a few more technical aspects. How well does what I've shared resonate with your understanding? We'll also discuss the tools that can help with this. Just to clarify about the number of crises, I might have mistakenly said per year instead of in a lifetime. I usually think in yearly terms, time per year, money per year. For an average person, there are about 3 to 4 crises in a lifetime, while an exceptional person may experience 50 to 1,000 crises throughout their life. I apologize for any confusion there. Chapter 11, Instrumental Level, Limiting Information. Now, if we understand the overall concept, let's dive a little deeper into the instrumental level. To ensure the meta development I described, the first tool is information limitation, specifically informational isolation. However, please pay close attention. At the beginning of the training, I detail 4 stages. In the first 2 stages, you don't need to impose strict limits on information. Rather, you should just moderate it a little to avoid drowning in an ocean of newsletters, trainings, and so forth. At this stage, you're likely consuming a lot, but filtering based on the principles I shared with you. But as you approach the third stage and move on to the fourth, informational isolation becomes critically important. Let me explain. For your self development to happen in the background, you need to ensure that the self part is greater than everything else. If you spend your days reading others' newsletters, attending their trainings, and reading their books, you're primarily consuming external content instead of nurturing your own. In the initial stages, this is acceptable. When a child is born, they are controlled by their parents. They don't need to focus on the self just yet. They need to learn to walk, eat with a spoon, and so on. This is normal. In the first 2 stages, you don't require that self focus. You push yourself forward with the help of others. But when you move on to the third and fourth levels, you now need to become a strong individual yourself. You must ensure that there's more of you in your life than there are other people. The option of constantly being in a bending field of influence no longer works. Initially, this is normal. You monkey around, learning from those you wish to emulate. Eventually, this phase passes. We all go through it. I experienced it with Nikolai Ivanovich Kozlov and Andre Parabellum. Now, I am friends with both of them, advising and helping them with their challenges. It's a natural progression. First, you go through a phase where you're in a corrective bending field. Then, you can maintain friendships with those individuals and operate at a similar level, or at least a comparable one. So, how do we make this radical transition from external information to internal? There's a whole array of informational channels that we need to either establish for ourselves or isolate ourselves from. For instance, the television, just throw it out. Not watching television is akin to not sniffing cocaine. It's a similar level of recommendation. It's clear that if you have a TV, just turn off the webinar and throw it out immediately. In the past, you could boast about not watching TV as a sign of being advanced. However, that's no longer a valid claim because social media, YouTube, and internet surfing have replaced television for many. For some, webinars and newsletters have taken its place. So there's nothing to be proud of, and ideally, you shouldn't have a TV at all. What to do about social media? I'm not an extremist. I won't say to remove social media entirely. I don't consider it pure evil. No, social media has its purpose and I use it, but it needs to be minimized. Social media becomes a problem when you get stuck in it. It becomes an information channel that overwhelms your brain from morning to night. You find yourself scrolling through news feeds and friend lists, which is the first issue. The second problem is that social media kills your communication. You can see this happening in cafes and restaurants. Friends and loved ones sit at a table, each engrossed in their iPhones. To me, that's a sign of brain degradation and a decline in human interaction. So, despite never having been addicted to this, I strictly limit myself. I don't allow any iPhones at the table when I'm with others. You can spend 15 minutes on social media reading some funny posts, no problem there. It's okay to chat with friends as long as you do it moderately, sensibly, and with control. My recommendation is to confine this to non resource blocks. Engage in it while commuting, sitting in the restroom, or waiting for something during buffer time. Don't let it invade your productive hours. Regarding social media and information isolation, unsubscribe from people or groups that publish political content, bad news, or any kind of trash. Remove them from your friends list, and everything will be fine. This kind of content brings nothing positive to your life and just clutters your mind. You need to cut this out as you would with television. In the past, you watched TV and then stopped. Now you're getting the same crap through social media. You must limit yourself accordingly. The same goes for YouTube and internet surfing. It's not bad to watch a video now and then, but if you do it systematically and regularly, instead of focusing on your main activities, or if you find yourself endlessly surfing the web, that becomes a problem. Your mind gets cluttered, leading to informational pollution. Now let's move on to specifics, developmental tools. Newsletters do a mass cleanup. I realized that even with how little I subscribed to, I still went in and unsubscribed from even more. Your task is to log into your email account and mass unsubscribe from everything unnecessary. Don't be lazy, even if unsubscribing is a hassle. I once received a subscription from Ozon, even though I've never bought anything from them. And unsubscribing wasn't a one-click deal. I had to log in, reset my password, and uncheck a box in the settings. Don't skip this step. Go into that damn account and uncheck that annoying box. What you don't read or don't respond to won't be useful to you. If you skim through a newsletter thinking, maybe I'll find something interesting, but haven't taken any action on it in the last 6 months, you won't need it. Don't store it for later. You'll never go back to those 8,714 messages. So, what to keep from all those subscriptions? From my experience, I've narrowed it down to two categories. The first is newsletters with direct value. For me, that's Ilyakov's newsletters. Not because of the new content, but for the quality of the writing. This is valuable to me because I'm a writing nerd. I write a lot: articles, sales texts, video scripts. I find professional interest in the writing quality he provides. And the second category is newsletters from key authors. You should have two, three, or at most five of them. Select these authors based on the criteria I've shared today. This means you'll take a selection system and choose 2, 3, 5 authors whose work you will genuinely follow. I don't believe you can objectively and adequately monitor more authors than that or learn from them consistently. 2 or 3 is already plenty. So, determine who you're actually reading or listening to. Just a few people you can count on one hand. Keep only those newsletters. I've kept the Mind Valley newsletter for professional reasons, and maybe one or two others. That's it. Everything else can be safely deleted because it's useless. You won't read it and you're not responding to it anymore. So why bother? Plus, if you clean up your training sources according to the criteria I gave you, especially if they're trash, why read those newsletters? The goal should be that you receive a maximum of 5 newsletters a day. This way, it's easier to manage your inbox. You won't have to sift through endless emails. Next up, webinars. You understand what webinars are? In 99% of cases, they're just long sales presentations structured so that the less useful the content, the higher the sales. That's why I really don't see the point in webinars under modern conditions. You might attend if you already know the author well and are sure they provide value on all levels, including for free. They should offer useful content, not vague motivational fluff with stories. If they have the right structure that you can't reach in person, then sure, it might be worth it. I understand. You can attend 1 or 2 webinars a month. Whether it's an automated or regular webinar doesn't matter. The junk will still be junk in any format. A good author will be good in any format. So I recommend limiting yourself to 1 to 2 webinars per month and cutting out the rest because what's the point? If you're considering purchasing a course, just look at the sales copy. It's much faster than spending an hour and a half or two listening to a meaningless sales presentation. Given that most of them are useless, low quality, and even uninteresting from a sales perspective, it's a complete waste of time. Just cross that off your list. Why bother? Next up, free materials like lead magnets, PDFs, promo materials, product launches, promotional videos. These are a bit easier than webinars because you can skim through them and fast forward. You don't have to wait for a scheduled time to listen to them. Plus, they don't clutter your inbox. However, you still need to apply the filtering we discussed at the beginning to avoid jumping at everything indiscriminately. Be strict about whether you'll watch this, whether you truly need it, and whether the author meets your criteria. Then you can decide whether to watch it or skip it. There are authors, I know some and listen to them, whose promotional materials are more useful than the free content from most authors. Their sales videos often have much more substance than the typical free, helpful content that many provide. So just analyze the usefulness of the content. I've given you all the criteria regarding both the content and the author, and choose what to watch. If you're at the first or second stage, to avoid drowning in this ocean of junk, like I mentioned with Interstellar, do this filtering even at those initial stages. Yes, consume a lot, but make it high quality. A lot of carefully selected products. Go ahead, develop yourself, please. No questions about that. This is what I mean by informational isolation. We're left with the zero process. Are there any questions about informational isolation regarding emails that open on a certain page with various news? Let me let you in on a secret. There are these magical programs called email clients. It's software that you install on your computer and it downloads your email. You don't need to log into a website. I don't log into websites, not Gmail or anywhere else. I only log into the email client and there's just my email, no ads, no junk. By the way, you should also check your spam folder because sometimes real spam ends up in your inbox while the important emails might get lost in spam. I've encountered that too. Sometimes these are activation emails or other useful and necessary ones. So, it's worth checking your spam occasionally and configuring your email service to filter out what is spam and what isn't. Chapter 12, Zero Process. Look, this is the cherry on top that summarizes everything we've talked about before. Remember, the 4 stages of self-development that guide you towards background self-development. The self-development tools to eliminate 99% of the junk that weighs you down and to focus only on the best self-development products. We discussed information limitation in great detail. The levels of self-development lead to a transition to a meta level. And now we reach the final point, the zero process. This is about transforming self-development into a background category. I'll show you how this is done. I speak from my experience about how this has worked for me. There are three components that are crucial for transitioning self development into a background category. So, the zero process consists of three components, three things you need to do for this to happen. The first thing I've drilled into you is the life strategy. Self development should not exist in isolation. One of the biggest problems why you experience too much unproductive self development is that you engage in it simply because you need to develop or you want to develop. But where to develop, in what direction, and with what tools, that just seems to happen on its own. The first thing you need to do is work out your life strategy. Your self development will stem from your life strategy. What's the additional bonus? When you've developed your life strategy, many of your self development tasks will be realized without your active participation, thanks to the life strategy itself. The life strategy inherently allows for the self realization of intentions. So, when you create a life strategy, you formulate your intentions, and then your strategic cycle begins. I literally wrote about this in the newsletter the other day. You should have seen it. One of the effects of this strategic cycle is that some of your intentions are realized unconsciously. No mysticism, no law of attraction, and no other nonsense. You simply give your brain tasks, and thanks to the strategic cycle, your brain accomplishes these tasks on its own without any special efforts on your part. The same happens with self development tasks. This is the first element. The second element is projection. This means transferring self development into all areas of life. You make self development not a separate process, but identical to any aspect of life. You can develop through hobbies, through relationships, and you can engage in self development on your way somewhere while traveling. Your journeys become self development opportunities because they are strategic points, managed crises, and renewals of your mind. Business becomes your self development. Interacting with friends and people in general becomes your self development. So instead of engaging in self development as a separate activity, you do it while involved in something else. I gave you an example in relationships about how to engage in self development. First of all, any relational problem, any task you face is an opportunity for self development. Any quarrel, any conflict is an exercise in self development. So, why engage in self development separately when you are already doing it? People often behave this way. When they have a conflict in a relationship, they insult each other, get offended, yell, and do other things. Then, a couple of days later, they go to a webinar on happy relationships, thinking they are somehow engaging in self development. They listen to the webinar, and then they go back to fighting in their relationships. Self development occurs on its own while life goes on separately. As you can see, what happens is that only the illusion of self development is created. I joke about this topic with women's training sessions. A woman, while sitting in the hall during a women's workshop, feels love and acceptance, absorbing sunlight with her vagina. Everything is just great for her. And then she goes outside where it's dirty and slushy. And at home, there's some crap lying on the couch. She's not earning any money, and her partner doesn't need anything. She has to gather the kids, check their homework, send them to school, and go to work where her boss is a pain in the ass. That's it. And love and acceptance exist only as long as she's sitting in the hall, inhaling sunlight with her vagina. This is a traditional problem. To avoid this, we do exactly the opposite. We engage in self development during life, not at workshops. At workshops, we quickly grasp the meaning and then go live our lives and develop ourselves there. So you transfer all your self development into life. You don't engage in self development as a separate activity. You do it while living. When you're traveling, instead of staring at advertisements, you could do some self development exercises. I mentioned travel. I can hardly travel in sightseeing mode. By the third day, I'm fed up. Landmarks become just that, landmarks, and everything annoys me. I'm bored with it all. So for me, traveling is about spending a day or two walking around, seeing what's out there, taking a few photos, and the rest is a strategic point for renewal, something to do or write about. It's activity, not the nauseating experience of wandering around with a camera at monuments. The same applies to business and socializing with friends. Who says you have to talk about trivial stuff with friends, like who was born or died, or the dog, cat, turtle, whatever? You could do the same with your friends. This shows the quality of the people you have in your life. What do you talk about with them? Do you have empty conversations about daily life? Or do you have genuinely interesting discussions that enrich and develop you? This self development through any area of life, this projection, we transfer self development from a special category into everything else and do not engage in it separately. Once again, I remind you to relate this to the stages. In the first two stages, you will have minimal self development. On the contrary, you will be working hard on it. But as you progress, you will project self development into all other areas of life. This is the second element. The third and most important element is reflection. Here, I mean observing yourself as the main element of self development. How does this manifest in practice? First, the strategic work. I've already mentioned that. Next, various analyses summarizing, analyzing the year, the week, the month, the day. You can keep a daily journal. Gradually, you develop self observation and self reflection. You become accustomed to looking at what's happening from the outside. You learn not just to do things and rush through an endless flow. You learn to stop and reflect. You observe yourself and what's happening in your life, not just once a year at a strategic point, but constantly. Slowly, you develop the skill of self observation and self reflection, and you start to self develop simply from thin air every day, continuously, without needing anything extra. Because absolutely any life process, any activity, any event in your life becomes a point of self development for you. This is what the zero process leads to. First, you transfer self development into all areas of life. And then, thanks to the development of self reflection, any moment, any action, any inaction, any event, any communication becomes a point of self reflection, and therefore a point of self development. When you combine the three components strategy, projection, and reflection you transition into the zero process and background self development. This is the cherry on top. It's simply the culmination and peak of what I have achieved in self development. What I'm sharing today is a meta level. It's about how I approach self development in principle, and the most important technology for me is the life strategy. That's why we're discussing it so much today and keep coming back to it. For me, everything is based on this from a technological perspective. You're very welcome. If you need anything in the future, don't hesitate to reach out. Have a great day.